and welcome back to the channel. We have a really exciting NFL mock draft coming to you. This is a full first round mock. We will continue this mock later on in the week. We will have a second round mock coming out as well. And we're going to get started right away. But before we do, hit that subscribe button if you are new to the channel. We post a lot of NFL draft content and also just NFL content in general. Hit that like button if you do enjoy what you see in today's video. Now, number one, we have the Detroit Lions, who picked up a win against the Minnesota Vikings. Now they are no longer winless. There's obviously a lot that needs to happen for this team in order to improve. Where do you think the key areas are for this roster?
The beginning of the year, the discussion started, is it Kayvon Thibodeau or a quarterback for the Detroit Lions? That was really what we were looking at. Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell were the names we were considering possibly number one overall for the Detroit Lions, who we expected to be the worst team in football. And so far this year, they have been, even at that one win that they got today against the Minnesota Vikings. For me, now the conversation has shifted to, is it Kayvon Thibodeau or is it Aiden Hutchinson? In my opinion, Aiden Hutchinson's been the best player in college football this season, has 15 tackles for loss, 13 sacks, has been absolutely dominant. Anyone who watched his game against Ohio State saw how much he flashed, and that was against a really good offensive line there. They have two guys who are going to be drafted in the first two rounds this year, including Nicholas Pettit-Frere, who's one of the best pass blockers in all of college football. Aiden Hutchinson dominated that game, had 15 pressures, and for that reason, he's staying in the state of Michigan here. He's the first overall selection and very much deserved for the Detroit Lions.
Sometimes you have to take what the latest information is given to you. Aiden Hutchinson has been dominant, especially as of late. It's hard to have him not go number one. I know we've all been consistent on having Thibodeau go as potentially the number one defensive player, but it's a very hard decision to make because you're really banking on what you're seeing, the current product with Aiden Hutchinson. I see the upside with Thibodeau, but that's a tough decision that Detroit will have to make. At number two, you have the Houston Texans, and the Houston Texans are definitely, they really need things across the board. Defensively, they're one of the oldest rosters actually in the NFL, which is surprising considering they are in rebuild mode. So they have to look for some youth, and they're at a really good position. A lot of great defensive players, but there's also that quarterback position that's in play. What direction do you think they need to go?
I think the Texans are actually going to be a little bit shy about that quarterback position this high in the draft. Now, if a team wanted to jump up, Houston would definitely be willing to listen to that. But at this point, they're happy to see Kayvon Thibodeau on the board. They're going to go with him second overall. Like we said, he's a guy who we've been looking at as the number one overall pick throughout the season, and he's deserving of that. When you watch him on film, we have two guys who I think at that edge position this year are worth number one overall picks. Houston very happy to grab Kayvon Thibodeau at this spot, number two overall. Not very often you get a player of his caliber. Second overall in the draft, we're looking like at Chase Young a few years ago when he came out. Of course, Joe Burrow jumped him. Kayvon Thibodeau has some of that similar upside in terms of his athleticism, his ability to win both in pass and rush situations as well. He's going to be very good in the NFL, and I think he's a really good grab, maybe even higher upside than Hutchinson, but not quite the production because some of the injuries.
At number three, we have Jacksonville. Jacksonville's in a position where they just seen two key pass rushers go off the board in a very dominant fashion. Now, you look at it here for this team, they need a lot of help in the secondary. They need an offensive tackle. There's so much that needs to be fixed on this roster, and there's a lot of guys to help fill those holes. Who's the best fit here?
I think you're going to have to look at that offensive tackle spot. It's going to be Evan Neal, extremely athletic at that tackle position, played right tackle historically for Alabama, kicked over to left tackle this year, and has not skipped a beat. He's been really good for the Crimson Tide, who are now number one ranked in the AP Top 25 after a dominant win against Georgia. And Evan Neal's just been a real staple on that offense. I think Jacksonville, for quite some time, has been looking for that level of consistency at that tackle position. Of course, they've spent high picks in the past on certain tackles that just haven't worked out or panned out the way that they would expect. Evan Neal's going to be a different story here. You're going to put him in as your starting left tackle for the next 5 to 10 years, and you're going to be extremely happy with the production you get from him.
Yeah, Jacksonville's really tried that tackle spot. Cam Robinson, Juwan Taylor, guys that just have not really worked out. Last year, they invested a pick in Walker Little at that tackle spot, so maybe Evan Neal can be that complementary piece and be a franchise cornerstone along that offensive line. At number 4 and 5, we will go ahead and go to your New York Jets. This is a weird position. We thought Seattle would be picking mid-20s when this trade was first made for Jamal Adams. Here they sit with the 4th and 5th pick plenty of defensive talent available, I have a feeling that's where you're going.
The New York Jets have gotten very lucky with how this has panned out based off that Jamal Adams trade. Of course, I still think that they got pretty good value when they initially traded him, getting 2 first-round picks for a safety. Very, very good value. But now that we're looking at this pick possibly being a top 5 selection because of some bad breaks for Seattle in terms of Russell Wilson's health, they're having a very atypical season for what the Seahawks have been over the last decade. The Jets need to reap the benefits here, and there's 2 guys out here that are going to really change the culture for this New York Jets defense. When they get Carl Lawson back next year, you're looking at a better pass rush. I already like what they have across the defensive line. I still think there's some room for improvement, but the 2 best players on the board here are Derek Stingley and Kyle Hamilton. Those are the 2 selections we're going with here in order. Kyle Hamilton 4, and then Derek Stingley 5th overall. These 2 guys are just too talented to pass up on. Kyle Hamilton, I know he's a safety. I know that a lot of people are going to say, oh, whoa, you don't take a safety that high. You also don't usually trade up for a guard to get him 14th overall. Joe Douglas doesn't care what position a guy plays. He wants good football players, and he's getting 2 really, really great ones here. Derek Stingley, the top cornerback in this class. That's phenomenal positional value as well. Extremely athletic, good in coverage. But then Kyle Hamilton just makes plays all over the field. I don't care if he's a safety. He has to be the selection here if you're the New York Jets. It's a massive need. Marcus May's out with an injury. He's also in his contract season. Jets can't roll into next year with real question marks at the safety spot or the cornerback spot. They solve both here back-to-back.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting those 2 guys in the secondary is really going to help that back end of that defense. Really, really key. Great value as well. That's a home run draft for the New York Jets already. And now, once again, we have a weird situation. We got the Giants back-to-back picks, 6 and 7. There's a lot that they can address with this team. Obviously, they aren't where they need to be. They're going to be having a general manager change likely in the offseason. So what is it in store for the Giants here?
For the Giants, I'm looking across the defensive front to begin with here. I'm looking at the edge position and interior defensive line position. DeMarvin Leal is going to be the selection 6th overall. He can play in a variety of areas, which I think is really key for this team. Leonard Williams had similar versatility when he came into the draft a few years ago, and he's been such a great player for the Giants since they acquired him from the New York Jets. They need another player along that defensive front, though, that can make plays. They lost Alvin Tomlinson in free agency this past year to the Minnesota Vikings, and now they get a guy who can fill in at the edge, maybe play inside a little bit, and is just all around a good football player across the defensive front, which is really where the Giants need to improve yet. They need another guy to help out Leonard Williams. And then pick 7, we're flipping it. We're going on to the offensive line here with Tyler Linderbaum. The Giants have tried a variety of ways to improve this offensive front, and I think they've neglected the center position a little bit too much. Center is one of the most important positions in all of football, and I don't think it gets talked about enough, especially when you have a younger quarterback helping pick up blitz assignments. Tyler Linderbaum is going to be very, very good early into his career addressing those things. He's very good in the run game as well. We see how successful Iowa's been historically with their offensive linemen they produce as well. Linderbaum just going to be the latest rendition of that. The Giants get 2 really good selections here for their trenches.
Yeah, really weird draft already having teams with back-to-back selections. Now we're moving on to number 8. We have the Atlanta Falcons, a team that's definitely in a transitional phase. Arthur Smith's done a pretty good job with the roster that he's had. Definitely banged up along that offense, and not having Kelvin really hurts as well. But they're in a weird position here. They're moving on from Matt Ryan. Very likely is the time now to go ahead and get that quarterback. We've noticed that they are starting to slip in these drafts.
Yeah, I think Matt Ryan's going to have a market this year. However, I'm not looking at the quarterback spot just in this class quite yet for Atlanta. In fact, I'm going to go along the interior defensive line, and I think that they stay in state here with Jordan Davis. He's had a phenomenal season for the Georgia Bulldogs, and even though his stats maybe don't back up a top 10 selection, watching him on film, the combination of power and athleticism is evident when you see him. He's going to be able to make plays in the backfield. You put him next to Grady Jarrett along that defensive front. You already have a good linebacking core with Alua Kuhn and also Deion Jones. You're looking to get strong up the middle. They took Richie Grant in the 2nd round last year. I like that selection as well. I know they got young cornerbacks. They have to improve at that spot as well. It's going to be more than just round 1 here for Atlanta. They have to capitalize on a lot of their selections. But I think Jordan Davis, a very steady, strong selection, 8th overall.
And once again, there it is. Again, that's why you have to be subscribed to this channel. There's a lot of changes throughout the course of the year. At number 9, we have the Carolina Panthers. Just fired Joe Brady a couple hours ago, and now they have a top 10 selection to work with here. I know in the past you have mock quarterback, but is that the trend that we're going to see once again?
Quarterback's a need, but we're not looking there quite yet. I mean, watching the Panthers, their offensive line play is just brutal. There's been too many times where edge rushers, I'm just talking strictly edge rushers, they send a 4-man pressure and a guy doesn't get blocked. I don't know how that continuously happens. Charles Cross needs to be the selection here. They need to go with tackle. Their dream scenario is somehow Evan Neal falls to them, or they maybe make a quick move up to Evan Neal, but it's tough because they don't have second and third round picks this year based off some of the trades they've made. They're in a tough situation. They're in a tough bind. Charles Cross, I think, is going to be the best selection they can make at this point. Ike Mekwonu, someone who I'd also consider, but I think they need a little bit more help in the pass game in terms of blocking rather than in the run game. That's why I opted for Cross over Ekwonu.
Yeah, Charles Cross, phenomenal pass protector for Mississippi State. At number 10, you have the Minnesota Vikings just coming after the loss against the Detroit Lions. Lot to fix. Mike Zimmer very likely will not be back next year. It's a tough pill to swallow for this team that had high hopes heading into the season. Now, if you are Minnesota here, huge need at corner. We've been mocking that a ton, but maybe you go outside of that. What's your thoughts on this team?
I do want to look at the cornerback spot. Just watching it, the game could have been sealed today with Bashaud Breeland dropping an interception and then also the off coverage decision at the end of the game. Give up a curl route to win the game. I don't understand that right on the goal line. That is inexcusable. And for that reason, I think Mike Zimmer is not going to be the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings next season. And if he was, I would have looked at Ahmad Gardner being the selection because that would have made sense for his system. However, I think they're going to go in a different direction. They go with Kaiir Elam here, a little bit more athletic than Gardner, maybe a little bit higher upside, and something I could see Spielman pulling the trigger on. He's looked at some athletes at that cornerback position before, specifically Trey Waynes comes to mind. Kaiir Elam, I think, does make a lot of sense, 10th overall. They need more corner help. They don't have anyone on any long-term contracts there. I know Cam Dantzler made a play today, but they need more athleticism, and they need someone who can battle on the outside.
That's a good selection for this team. And now we have the New Orleans Saints. They have a big decision to make at that quarterback spot, Jameis Winston being hurt. And we see that Taysom Hill is not a quarterback that they want to keep long-term. So if you are the New Orleans Saints, are you thinking at that quarterback spot, or is there another area of this team that you need to really address?
I think the quarterback position is something that they are going to consider. However, I don't necessarily know if they're willing to pull the trigger on it at this point with who's really on the board. Instead, I'm going to have them go with Garrett Wilson. I think they need a little bit more athleticism at that wide receiver position. The key to their offense this year hasn't necessarily even been the quarterback spot. Jameis Winston played well when he was healthy, but they never had a guy to stretch the ball down the field and make big plays. And I think that's what Garrett Wilson brings them. Maybe not the best big play wide receiver in the first round here, but I think overall probably just the best overall wide receiver and definitely worth the 11th overall selection if you're New Orleans. You get Mike Thomas back healthy next year, hopefully. Come in with Garrett Wilson. You go from having 0 number 1 level wide receivers to potentially 2. That is a big time upgrade for that offense.
Yeah, it's a huge jump for this team. Obviously, they've been struggling with injuries all season long. And at that wideout spot, they could look really dangerous next year. At number 12, we have the Washington football team. We keep saying it. They're a quarterback away from really making a run at things. Their defense hasn't been as good as we expected it this year to be. Taylor Heineke's done a pretty nice job for what he is as a quarterback. Definitely a gamer, a guy that you can win with. However, you want to take your team to the next level. Is there a quarterback here that can do that?
I don't necessarily see them taking a quarterback here again. I'm pushing the quarterbacks down the board a little bit in this mock draft. And here for Washington, they're still in the playoff hunt, but I think a key thing for them is they need a little bit more help along the offensive line. I'm going Ike Mekwonu here from NC State. I think he's going to be someone who can slot in, play at that tackle spot. I know last year they drafted Samuel Cosby. They still need more. They've got some concerns as well at the guard spot long term. They need to address the offensive line. Quarterback is a massive need. Look for them to be a player for a guy like Matt Ryan, who we talked about a little bit earlier, maybe a guy like Ben Roethlisberger. I know a lot of people are considering the fact that he's going to retire. I think it's possible he plays again. Cam Newton maybe will be a free agent this year that wants to go to Washington, reunite with Ron Rivera. There's a lot of different options for Washington. It doesn't necessarily need to come through the draft at that quarterback spot.
At number 13, you have the Philadelphia Eagles, who for today in terms of draft stock, they're losers because winning across the board was Miami. The Eagles also won, and the Colts won. So all their first-round picks definitely took a hit in terms of the draft number. They have a lot to work with pick here from pick 13 to pick 19. Now, there's a lot of options, and you have to be strategic on how you pick these guys in order.
Yeah, there is a few different guys that I think that they would want to look at in a specific order here, starting with Kenyon Green. I think that he's the best available interior offensive lineman, and I don't even think it's really close in this year's class. He is very, very smart. He's able to pick up blitz assignments. He's able to help tackles. He's also athletic enough to really help on any designed stunt blitzes. I think he's going to be really, really good at the NFL level as a guard with his athleticism and his IQ at that guard spot. I think it's a rare mix at the guard position. He's going to come in, he's going to be a real difference maker at the guard spot, which is something you usually don't say about NFL guards.
Yeah, pretty good value there for the Eagles at number 13. You move on to pick 14. You have the Cleveland Browns. Definitely probably thinking about receiver. Another edge rusher could be in the cards. There's a lot that this team could do. Definitely a disappointing season thus far for the Browns. However, that's not to say that they can't pick it up and finish the season strong. So how do you think you can best help this roster with this pick?
You had talked earlier about the importance of being subscribed to the channel. This is one of the key reasons why. This is a massive shakeup from what we've done in the past. We're going to the edge position here, and no, it's not going to be George Karlaftis. We're looking at David Ojabo from Michigan. He makes a massive jump for me here, up to 14th overall. Watching him for Michigan this year, he's been that dynamic duo with Aiden Hutchinson. He's been nearly as productive as Aiden Hutchinson in a lot of ways. Now, I don't think his strength's going to translate as well to the NFL, but I think he's a really good speed rusher, and I think he can help free up Myles Garrett there a little bit because of his ability to get off the edge quickly. I think he's going to help draw in some chip blocks from running backs, and I think you're going to have to maybe spell a tight end at him a little bit as well, just based off of his speed, able to get around the edge quickly. You bring in him, help Myles Garrett out a little bit. They have to figure out wide receiver. That's going to be a round 2 selection for them this year, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Ojabo, a guy that can definitely force turnovers. He's second in the nation in terms of forced fumbles. Really, really impressive for the young guy. David Ojabo, a guy that we had not seen in the first round, definitely has propelled his stock over the last couple of weeks. At 15, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh, a team that definitely needs a quarterback. They need offensive line. There's a number of things that they need. They have a good head coach. They have some nice infrastructure, but they have to continue to build this team in a retooling phase. So what's the next step for this Pittsburgh team?
They definitely do need offensive linemen. However, a lot of the best offensive linemen are already off the board here in the top 14 picks. For me, it's going to be the quarterback position now finally. Matt Corral out of Ole Miss. I love his fit here. He's able to get rid of the ball quickly, has very, very good sip on his football. And he's able to move now. I think that's kind of the opposite of what everything Ben Roethlisberger's been for him this year. Ben Roethlisberger has lost some of that arm velocity. He's lost some of his ability to move, extend plays. Matt Corral is going to bring a lot of that for Pittsburgh. And I think Mike Tomlin getting his quarterback back, you're going to see this team probably be an 11-12 win team as with Matt Corral as a rookie, because he doesn't make a lot of mistakes either. He does not turn the ball over very often. He's played a lot of good teams there for Ole Miss, and he has avoided turnovers for the most part. I think this is a home run pick for Pittsburgh.
It's funny you mentioned the turnover thing. Just a year ago, people are saying this guy turns it over way too much. Now he's become way less turnover prone. You love to see that. A lot of great development there under Lane Kiffin. At 16, you have the Philadelphia Eagles. This is their second first-round pick. They just took Kenyon Green. There's a nice edge rusher on the board, nice linebacker. There's a lot of great options for this team. What direction are you opting to go?
It's got to be linebacker Nakobe Dean here, especially with Denver and Las Vegas right behind you. Two teams that are probably looking for a little bit of athleticism into the middle. Nakobe Dean becomes a phenomenal run stopper there in Philadelphia. And this is an atypical pick for Philadelphia as well. They tend to not look at linebacker in round 1. They have 3 picks this year. They need to find linebacker in round 1 this year. And Nakobe Dean's the best of the bunch, in my opinion. You bring him in 16th overall. You've already been able to address offensive line a little bit with Kenyon Green. Now you get a great linebacker in Nakobe Dean. This is a great start to the draft for Philadelphia, even though their picks all shuffled downward with some of the wins this week.
As a phenomenal player on a great defense at Georgia, Nakobe Dean, good value for the Eagles at number 16. And now we have the Denver Broncos, and the Denver Broncos are once again going through a retooling phase. They've been a little better than we've expected thus far this season. There's a couple of quarterbacks that could make some sense. Also, Vic Fangio defensively loves to take guys. They could be looking at the edge spot. Now, if you are in their shoes, who is the man?
It's got to be George Karlaftis. And again, this is another example of really good value. Freshman season at Purdue, Karlaftis had 17 tackles for loss. He was very productive, of course. Sophomore season got shortened because of some of the COVID issues. But then coming back this year, not the same level of production, but I still think that when you watch him on film, he's worthy of a top 20 pick in the NFL draft, probably worthy of a top 10 pick even for a specific edge-needy team. I thought about him for Atlanta 8th overall. He made some sense. I opted for the interior defensive line, though. George Karlaftis is going to be really good in the run game. I still think Denver needs a little bit more help, a little bit more speed off the edge as well, maybe an outside linebacker type. But George Karlaftis comes in, you put him next to Shelby Harris, and you're looking at a really good run-stopping unit up front.
Yeah, George Karlaftis is going to be a great fit there, especially since Von Miller's gone. You add in George Karlaftis, you have Bradley Chubb. Nice edge rushing duo for this team. At number 18, you have the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Raiders are in a position where they have to make some change. As Mike Mayock, the long-term GM there, we don't know. We don't know who's going to be the coach. There's so much in the air for this team. Hard to kind of draft, with all of that up in the air. But doing your best knowledge here, what do you think the Raiders could definitely use at this spot?
I think that they need to look at the cornerback position. I know they've gotten pretty solid production this year. However, long-term, I'm looking at that as a long-term hole. Having Casey Hayward this year, he's getting up there in age. You can't rely on that going into next season or thereafter. Trent McDuffie is going to be the selection. One of the best coverage guys in college football this season. If he was a little bit bigger, Austin, we've been talking about this all year long in our mock drafts. If he was a little bit bigger, probably would be a top 10 overall pick. Doesn't have the prototypical size you're looking for in round one, but has all the production that you want to find in round one. The Raiders have been looking for the cornerback spot. Damon Arnett, of course, got released earlier this year, a former round one pick. They go with McDuffie here. They need to find that cornerback, and they got it.
Yeah, McDuffie's an ultimate gamer, a guy that can move in a lot of different spots on the defense. And then finally, we have the Eagles once again. They get another shot at a first-round pick. A lot of talented players remain on the board. What are you focused in on if you are the Eagles?
We're going to the cornerback position, and it's going to be Ahmad Gardner here out of Cincinnati. Philadelphia has looked at Cincinnati quite a bit in years past at the across their team. They found a lot of nice Bearcats that have served good roles for this team. Ahmad Gardner going to maybe be the best of the bunch from that group. He's very, very good in man coverage. I am higher on Ahmad Gardner than most people. I view Ahmad Gardner as a top 10 worthy overall selection. However, I acknowledge that most of the mock draft community does not feel that way about Ahmad Gardner. I have him going 19th here in the mock because this is expecting what I expect to happen, not what I would necessarily do. Ahmad Gardner, a really, really good selection here, in my opinion. I think the Eagles are extremely happy walking away with Kenyon Green, Nakobe Dean, and Ahmad Gardner.
Yeah, great haul of draft selections for this team. At number 20, we have the Miami Dolphins, and the Miami Dolphins, they just keep winning. Kind of crazy for them, and it doesn't affect their draft selection in the first round, obviously, because that belongs to Philadelphia. If you are the Dolphins here at number 20, a couple of really good players on the board for them. How do you want to help complement Tua or really address this defense?
I'm going to look at the offensive tackle spot here because I think for Tua, you just need to get a little bit more consistency along the offensive line. He's been so much better in year two, and we're actually going to scroll down a little bit. This is maybe going to be surprising to people based off the rank. Nicholas Pettit-Freer. I know he says ranked 57. He had a tough game against Aiden Hutchinson, but remember, Aiden Hutchinson was the first overall selection in this draft. A lot of people have had tough days against Aiden Hutchinson. I think that game was more about Aiden Hutchinson, who he is as a player, than who Nicholas Pettit-Freer is as a football player. I still see him as a very good pass blocker in the NFL. Probably play him at right tackle where we saw him against Michigan quite a bit, and you can protect Tua Tagovailoa's blindside there.
At 21, we have the Cincinnati Bengals coming off of a loss against the Chargers. And if you are the Bengals here, you definitely have to look at that tackle spot. That's something that we have been thinking about addressing in our past mocks. But there's also some positions on defense that are worthy of taking. Maybe you look at a corner. What's your thoughts for this pick?
I had thought about that cornerback spot, but I'm also going to go look at the edge position a little bit. I think that they could use a little bit more speed. Of course, Trey Hendrickson, really good with his hands, good power at that edge spot. I think that they could use a little bit more bend and a little bit more athleticism. Drake Jackson from USC. I like his ability to come off the edge, get low, and beat guys with his bend and his speed. He's going to be able to get after the quarterback, and I think the Bengals just need a little bit more help in that area. Drake Jackson solves that for them, and then they've got two really nice edges built into that roster for years to come.
Now, Drake Jackson is a selection that you're banking on some upside. Definitely has the build, the length, the athleticism. There's so much to love about him as a prospect, and he can keep getting better and better. At 22, you have the Chargers, and the Chargers coming off of a win against the Bengals, really hoping to race up to the first spot in that AFC West. Really, really tough division there to win. And if you are the Chargers, there's a couple of positions contract-wise that you're thinking about. Wide receiver, maybe one of them. Really talented guy still on the board, a couple of them for that matter. Do you view wide receiver as a potential target for this team?
It definitely is in round one. I think there's a few other ways they could look, maybe interior defensive line, edge as well makes some sense to me. But the NFL should be afraid of this, and the Chargers, Tom Telesco specifically, does such a great job finding this level of talent when it falls to him in the draft, and he doesn't miss out on it. Did this a few years back with Derwin James. He's going to do it now with Jameson Williams. Think Jalen Guyton on steroids. Jalen Guyton has found a ton of success working down the field with Justin Herbert, and now you bring Justin Herbert a severe round one level talent in Jameson Williams, someone who can make stuff happen after the catch, can stretch the ball down the field. This is a nightmare for other teams in the NFL. You've got your left tackle now in Rashawn Slater. That was a phenomenal pick last year. Jameson Williams comes in now. The Chargers are going to be making a ton of plays offensively. Teams are not going to have enough to keep up with it. If they bring back Mike Williams, even better. If not, they won't miss him because Jameson Williams is that level of talent.
Yeah, two completely different style receivers. However, the results are going to be the same. A lot of production out of that wide receiver 2 spot. At 23, we have the Buffalo Bills, and the Buffalo Bills are a team we've been pretty consistent on mocking at cornerback. Levi Wallace has actually played pretty well this season, statistically speaking. You have Tre'Davious White there as well. Maybe you think still in that secondary, or do you look maybe on that offensive line, linebacker spot, a couple of different areas that they can go. They've had a disappointing season thus far from where they expected to be. How can they right the wrongs here?
I think they got to look at the cornerback spot, especially with Tre'Davious White now going out with an ACL. I'm not sure what his return to football is going to look like going into next season. So it's vital that they find some guys who can really play at that position. And it's going to specifically be Andrew Booth Jr. here out of Clemson. I like his physical traits that he provides at the cornerback spot. He can play physically. Now, I think he's got to improve in actual man-to-man coverage. However, looking at Buffalo, they like to draft off of athleticism and potential. We've seen that with Ed Oliver. We saw that with Edmonds as well when they drafted him for the middle of that defense. Andrew Booth Jr., I think, has a really high ceiling because of some of those physical traits I had mentioned. He comes into Buffalo and is going to compete for that cornerback 2 spot in year 1.
And now we have the Detroit Lions once again here with the Rams selection. If you are the Detroit Lions, you address that front 7. You still are thinking about that wide receiver spot. There's a ton of wideouts still at this position for them. And there's also a particular quarterback that's super dynamic that has fallen all the way to 24. What direction do you want to take this squad?
It's going to be more front 7 here. I know, to me, if this is what I was actually doing myself, it would be a wide receiver or a quarterback. However, this is what I think will happen. We're going to look into the front 7. We're going to look at the linebacker spot specifically here. Last year, they took Aleem McNeil along the defensive front, also Levi Onwuzurike. They also now have already drafted in this draft Aiden Hutchinson. So you're looking at a better defensive line. Now you complement that with a Devin Lloyd selection, very solid in coverage, and also another guy who can be a thumper in the run game. The Lions need to be better in the front 7. There's no question about that. They need to be better in a lot of areas of football. But I think front 7 specifically helps isolate them a little bit more against the run, and I think that's going to be a real focus of emphasis for Detroit. I know they need to find a quarterback. It's just not going to be right now pick 24.
Devin Lloyd was absolutely huge in that Pac-12 championship against Oregon. He was all over the field, had that pick as well in that game. Devin Lloyd really put his skill on display on the biggest stage. Really, really impressive. Detroit gets a really good player at 24. At 25, this is exactly kind of the area we were starting to think that Kansas City should be around at this point in the season. They're picking up, they're stacking wins, but there's so much to fix yet on this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where they have improved. However, in the offseason, they still got to make some adjustments.
Right, there is definitely some moves that they need to make. And I also want to just preface this quick. 25 to 32, we're not doing any mock trades in this video. However, I expect 1 or maybe 2 of these teams to move out for some of the quarterbacks. Now, when you look at 25 to 32, the common trend with these teams is most of them don't need to find a quarterback for their actual organization. They have their quarterback in place. I do think a team is going to try and jump up in here for a guy like Kenny Pickett, or maybe for a guy like Malik Willis or Sam Howell. But again, we're not mocking that. So all those quarterbacks are going to be available in round 2. That is a specific little adjustment I need to make sure you guys are aware of. Now 25 here for the Chiefs is going to be Jermaine Johnson. I love this selection for them because at that edge position, I think that they need to find a little bit more production there so that they can move Chris Jones back into where he's best. That is the interior. That's where he gets the most pressure. When he's played inside, their defense has been better. I think they need an edge rusher in order to unlock what Chris Jones is best at.
At 26, we have the Dallas Cowboys. Definitely thinking corner here. This is a team that they've been up and down this year. We've seen the highs, the lows with this team. However, at the end of the day, they definitely need to look at the corner spot. Trayvon Diggs has been special this season. However, the other corner spot has been less desirable. Where do you think they need to go?
Right, Trayvon Diggs, 9 interceptions this year. It's absolutely crazy production. They got to go with Roger McCreary here out of Auburn. Just need another outside corner, someone who can at least battle and hopefully limit what the other team's been getting offensively. We've seen it all year long. Anthony Brown struggled. The Cowboys just don't have answers for number 2 wide receivers at this point. Roger McCreary hopefully going to be a step in the right direction for McCarthy and the Cowboys.
Now you have Tennessee here at 27. This is a team that's very, very hard to project. One of their biggest needs is that tight end spot. Do we view that there's a first-round draftable tight end? Maybe not. So maybe that waits until the second or third round. Where do you think they go here?
The Titans, they need an edge, but I'm going to look at the wide receiver spot here instead because I think this is a little bit of a projection of what Julio Jones now is in the NFL. I was weary about him when he got that extension with the Atlanta Falcons. They somehow got off that contract and brought in a really good asset in that deal from Tennessee. Julio Jones has been a good player throughout his career, but age catches up to everybody. They need a number 2 wide receiver, in my opinion, and it's going to be Treylon Burks here out of Arkansas. It's hard to find a guy who's 6'3" and can move the way that he does. You can get him the ball behind the line of scrimmage. He's going to make a lot of plays, and he's kind of reminding me of Corey Davis in a lot of ways with his ability to make plays happen after the catch. And oddly enough, that's the player they let walk in free agency and then decided to trade a second-round pick for Julio Jones. The Tennessee Titans have struggled this year. Ryan Tannehill has had his struggles. It's because of the weapons around him, especially when Derrick Henry went out. They've been banged up for sure. However, I don't think you can count on Julio Jones moving forward to be healthy and 100% of what he's been in his career.
And now we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in a situation where they are primed for another deep postseason run. But when it comes to next year, a lot of it comes down to the money. We talk about this every mock draft. How are they going to save money? Where are they going to cut costs? That could come along that offensive line, that defensive line. Where do you think it is this year?
For the most part, we've been talking about the offensive line being the way that they can save money. However, with what's off the board, I don't see that to be the case anymore. Wide receiver Chris Olave from Ohio State, they're going to have a tough decision to make here with Chris Godwin. They could not get a contract worked out with him, had the franchise tag him. I don't see the two sides doing that again. I see that they're going to enter a crossing point where either he's going to be on the team or he's not, and it's going to be through a contract extension, not through the franchise tag. They take Chris Olave here to mitigate the loss of Chris Godwin. I don't love that for them. However, I think that they've got some tough decisions they have to make. You can't just continue to have all your best players on a Super Bowl caliber team. You're going to lose guys. It's a tough loss to swallow, but Chris Olave, a very good weapon to come back in.
Yeah, a great replacement piece. If you do lose Godwin, Chris Olave can do a lot of great things, really, really stretch the ball down the field as well. Terrific all-around talent for Tom Brady. That would be scary if they are able to re-add him after losing Godwin. And now you have the New England Patriots who just continue to win. They're on an absolute tear. If you look at the New England Patriots here at 29, there's a couple of guys you might think along that offense could definitely help them out. For me, I would specifically look at the receiver position, but maybe you have other ideas for this team.
I do think they need to find a wide receiver. However, I just don't see them doing it here in round one. I think that N'Keal Harry's maybe scaring them away from that wide receiver spot just a little bit. Instead, I'm going to have them look at the edge and do kind of what the Patriots normally do and really try to focus the front seven in their roster building. Kingsley Enagbari here from South Carolina, I think a very good selection. We've seen him up around the top 10, top 15 quite a bit in some of our mock drafts. Getting him 29th overall here is good value for them, and I think that they could use a little bit more pass rush help, especially rotationally. Judon's been awesome this year for them. However, I think that they do need a little bit more help across from him.
At 30, we have the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers are in a really good position to make a huge, huge postseason run deep into that NFC. Aaron Rodgers in his final season with the squad. Next year is going to be a little bit of a transition year. They have a good opportunity here. Still a lot of talented players left on the board for this team. What direction are the Packers going in?
When you have a big arm quarterback like Jordan Love, you're trying to find him some help at that wide receiver spot, and you have a big arm guy, you need a big time receiver as well. That is Drake London here out of USC. He's dealing with an ankle injury right now, similar ankle injury to what Jalen Waddle had. Jalen Waddle, his draft stock obviously did not get hurt. Drake London, so productive for the Trojans this year. The moment he went out, their season completely fell apart as well. He is a great wide receiver option. He's going to come in, be that outside wide receiver. We don't know what Devontae Adams' contract looks like, if he's going to be back next year or not. I'm operating with the idea that he's not. Drake London going to be the wide receiver one next year for Green Bay.
At 31, we have the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens heavily favor that defense when looking here at this. Very possible they look along that offensive line, though. I think that's an area of need. But the problem is there's a drainage of offensive linemen in this first round. They find themselves on the wrong end of that run. Do you think they still dive deep into the bag and grab a lineman?
I would love for them to do that. However, like you said, with the drainage, with who's gone off the board, it's going to be safety here, Jaquan Brisker. I know that they like what they have at safety, but I think, again, this is just too good of talent to pass up on 31st overall. He comes in out of Penn State. He's been one of the bright spots for the Nittany Lions this year, who haven't necessarily lived up to the expectations they had coming in. Baltimore finds a really good safety. Their cornerback play has always been so consistent. Now you get a little bit more over-the-top help. I love this for Baltimore. They look like a Super Bowl contending team year in, year out because of decisions like this one.
And then now finally we conclude with the Arizona Cardinals. They're in a position where they probably are thinking corner. There's a couple of other areas of need for this team. Definitely thinking Super Bowl bound. But, maybe there's a couple of other guys that people don't really have on the front burners. Who can that be here at 32?
I think this is a massive trade down spot as well. I would see a team maybe jumping up for this, but again, we're not doing trades here. I'm looking at the cornerback spot. It's going to be Darian Kendrick at this juncture just because of what he's been historically throughout his college career. Been in a lot of big games for Clemson. He's going to be in a lot of big games this year for Georgia. He's a really good cornerback. I think he comes in with good prototypical size. He's going to be able to play outside wide receivers. And he becomes a very vital piece to that Cardinals defense that just needs a little bit more outside corner help. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's mock draft as well. Remember, this is what I think would happen, not necessarily what I would do. And obviously, things change throughout the season. Bowl games are going to have a lot of implications, so make sure you're subscribed.